Okay. Let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready.
What is this project called again? Are we calling it B5 Psyche or Media Psyche? What are we calling this?
Media Psyche is the
Okay.
name. I'll put it up on the bottom of the screen. There we go. Media Psyche.
Okay. Oh God, it's been so long. Okay. Hi everyone and welcome back to Media Psyche. I'm back to trying to attempt doing B5 as I said I would like a little while ago. It's been a long time since I've come back to this project and back to watching B5 again. Honestly, I've missed it, but now I'm a little out of practice again, so we'll see how this goes. I'm going to take a little time getting warmed up, but hopefully it'll go as smoothly as it did the last time. And yeah, last time I got all these gifts from Elaine for like B5 and then I never continued on with the project. Life got really busy. Um Life got really busy. So this year I decided to cut down on my workload a little bit and be able to make time to come back to this because it was important to me. And I also wanted to continue with B5 in the way that I was watching it. I didn't want to binge watch it and let it lose meaning. I recognize that, the more I kind of watched it from this place of analyzing it from my own transference and my own experiences, it had so much more meaning to me to watch these episodes, and I didn't want to lose that. So here I am for those that are interested and or stayed interested. Thank you. And let's see where I can take this and continue taking this. And thanks, Elaine, for being so patient with me and still wanting to do this project with me and trying to figure out ways to like have this project continue. So thank you, because I know you've been really busy as well.
How
So,
come you've been so busy? What happened?
well,
You don't want to share your good news with all your fans?
well, I've been busy because I ended up having two jobs. I've been busy maintaining a job as a clinical psychologist, one for working for a company where I work as a consultant going into nursing homes and providing services there. And that was pretty taxing and demanding. And then the other job I had was starting my private practice, and that began to build. And I wanted to make time for the clients that were reaching out to me. I was having a lot of people reach out to me for different reasons. In the state of Connecticut, apparently, I'm like one of the very few Asian American psychologists. So I've been getting referrals from more Asian American clients, especially because they're recognizing that they're missing out on the bicultural piece that they felt that their other therapists were not understanding. Um, and the other thing too is I take state insurance. So a lot of therapists, I guess, don't take that insurance. So that was another factor as well. And also because there are some people, I've gotten some referrals because they saw that I watch anime and I'm also a gamer, and they felt like I would be able to understand their world. Um, and I couldn't say no to them. So I ended up working a lot and having my practice build. And it has been honestly, truly, truly fulfilling. Um, and in many ways, I've been continuing to grow as a psychologist. So I've been dedicating a lot of time to that. So now I'm coming back to B5 because it was a project that I absolutely loved when we did it. It made me really think more about myself and look within myself to be able to understand myself more. Because the more you understand yourself, the more you actually understand the world and the people around you. Because we're really all connected by the same thing, which is the human condition. And we all experience the same emotions and the same sort of turmoil and challenges and joys and triumphs. But like we really first need to be able to understand our emotions first, to be able to understand truly like what the world is like and what other people are like. And then less of those cognitive distortions would be a big part of your life. The more you understand yourself, the more you can understand and see things a little bit more clearly without being so biased in negative ways.
Hmm.
And I think that's truly important. The more I stayed away from this project and not looked and not continued on, I felt like I was a little bit further from myself, to be honest. And even as I watched this episode, The Grail, I found myself struggling with some of the poignant things that they were saying in B5. And it was an interesting thing because I know that I have a lot of insight and awareness, but I felt like I felt like I hit a little bit of a wall where I couldn't take it a little deeper. And I think it's so imperative to be able to see much deeper into things because that's where the answer lies. Often therapists talk about using adaptive coping skills. It's all about coping skills that, coping skills this. I mean, I even heard from like one client where a therapist only printed out worksheets from a website called Therapy Aids, and that's all they did. They just had them fill out worksheets endlessly. But there was no gain from that because it was just simply filling out worksheets and just staying on the surface level and only talking about those adaptive coping skills. There's a problem with coping skills, though. It's great for being able to cope through the challenges that you're experiencing just to get through your day, the emotion, or whatever it is that you just need to get through so then you can continue just moving forward in the moment. So you're not stuck. But the problem is you have to be able to figure out what's underlying the actual issue. What's the source of your issue? And you have to take that much deeper in order to resolve that core of that issue so then it no longer becomes something that you actually need a coping skill for. At least not so many of those coping skills where you're trying to keep track of your list here. So this is why this project is important for me. I want to continue to build upon my critical thinking, my analysis, because that's where the core of really unlocking this deeper understanding lies.
So you think that this project has helped you be a better therapist? You've said that before in the past, but now that you've
Yeah,
been away from it for like over a year, do you see that even more being the case?
I absolutely do. During the time I was doing this recording, especially with Evangelion, because Evangelion definitely hit home for me in a very personal way. Um, it did that for me. But like when it comes to B5, it's much more versatile and there's so much more for me to like think about, like topics and concepts that I myself would not have thought about on my own unless it was, until it was presented to me, hey, look, this is an idea, this is a concept, this is a topic, give that some thought. And then you sit with it. And not having that kind of exposure, I think keeps you within the confines of like only what you know. So when
Mm.
I was doing, Babylon 5, yeah, it helped me. It challenged me with things to think about that I wouldn't have come across in my everyday life because it just hasn't happened. And part of growth is being able to have that kind of exposure and giving it time to like think about it, analyze it, and turning that into wisdom. So yes. Yes, the short answer is yes. Okay. Any other questions?
Uh, No, I just want to say I'm very happy that you have missed the project. It's
Yeah.
nice to know that it's something that you really found valuable, even though for like 9 years I was trying to convince you that it would be, and you didn't believe me.
Look.
So I just want to put that out there.
Sure. I mean, you could be a little bit bitter about it, but 9 years ago, honestly, I don't really think I would have been able to give it as much quality than I did the past, since our first recording this time around, right? Like that
Mhm.
we started like 2 years ago. Um, I can certainly say that within that time frame of having that kind of distance in between, I've very much grown as a person. I very much grown. Um, and come to understand what is important. And my thinking has changed quite a bit in order for me to be able to even do this analysis, right? So
Mm.
I don't have any regrets. I know that in many ways you feel that maybe um, if it happened a little sooner, maybe I would have gotten there a little sooner too. And that's absolutely true. But back then, it was so hard for me to like just not be so stuck, you know? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I remember Lawrence tried to film with me, like setting up, the whole room and everything at that time. And you're sitting with me and we would just sit there sometimes in silence for like 2 hours straight. And this recording would go on for like 5 to like 6 hours. And then like Lawrence had to like all he got was like 20 minutes out of it, you know?
I do remember those days,
That
yes.
was painful for all of us. So
But
I think we're in a much better place, don't you think? Hi everyone, I'm Jenny. I have decided to participate in this B5 Revisited project. I really don't know what it is, but I got sucked into it because my friends are geeks, because I have no clue, and I'm a total noob, so that's why I'm here. Well, I work as a behavioral health program director at a skilled nursing facility. I have a master's degree in clinical practices in psychology. I started a doctoral degree in clinical psychology. I'm not quite sure I'll be finishing the degree in clinical psychology because of so many different factors surrounding this, the attainment of this degree, the achievement of this degree. So that's still to be announced. I don't really know anything about Babylon 5. But from what you guys have told me, that there is a lot of wisdom to be gained from this experience. I am. I'm very much looking forward to starting the series. I really feel it's gonna be a challenge for me, especially when I start out, especially when I'm starting, because it's going to be a very different experience and exposure to things I've not been exposed to before. I feel this is a trick question. I've seen a Star Trek here and there. I've seen Star Wars. What else would be sci-fi? Starfleet Captain? That's from Star Trek? The Doc? 7 of 9? Is she part of Starfleet? There's a woman captain there. Captain something way. Captain Joan? Come on, this is bad.
I absolutely agree. And I think that, as much as I was trying to get you to engage with Babylon 5 all those many years ago, you you tried, and some good episodes did come out of that first go round, but I think that you still weren't quite understanding what the project was supposed to be. I think that you weren't comfortable on camera. That was your first time ever being on camera. And, putting yourself out there and putting your thoughts out there was very difficult. So it did take 10 years for you to get to this place of being able to be comfortable talking, being comfortable expressing your thoughts, and realizing that it was going to help you grow as a person, that it wasn't just some video project we were doing.
Look, I'm gonna admit this. I didn't have a lot of thoughts back then. That was a problem. But perhaps back then I had more questions than anything else, but I wasn't sure. I don't think that I was as dedicated to like looking for those answers. And
Hmm.
here we are on this episode called The Grail, right? And this is kind of like what this episode was for me. It was exactly that. When Aldous meets Thomas and he says to him, you know, you are a man of infinite promise. And what was the other line? Hold on, I gotta find the quote.
You were about to get all deep.
I know, and I ruined it, but it's okay. You can be whatever you want to be because you're a man of infinite promise and goodness. And that, like, basically he's pointing out to the fact that he had all this potential. And the first thing I thought of, and like the very reason why this episode resonates to me personally, was in being reminded of like our interactions. One of our first interactions when we started talking about like, our path, right? More specifically, my path, around the time when we first met. Around the time where we first met, I was in the doctorate program for psychology. But I had a lot of doubt. I mean, by that point, I was so burnt out with the kind of like workload I was managing at the time between working full time and going to school full time and maintaining my practicums. But I had a lot of doubt because I knew, like, I don't know, I just knew that I was so limited. My world was small. The world I came from was so small. I had such little exposure to things. But you had kept encouraging me to see the fact that I had potential. And that potential was so hard to see. And the longer, like, here I am going through the motions of school, going through the motions of doing field work, and I still felt like I wasn't contributing enough, or that I wasn't good enough, or that I was like that I was missing too much and not understanding. And in many ways, felt like an imposter. But I think the point was that, like, I didn't know that much and it was okay. And in that, I never felt really self-assured. And I wish I was, but this was the point that you had kept making. That the whole point of the whole thing was, and I think it was Aldous that said it, sometimes it's the search that counts and not the finding, right? And it's no different than saying, it's the journey, not the destination. But, we throw this quote around, but we never really take the time to like really understand it in a way that's constructive for us. Sometimes it's the search that counts and not the finding. And, yeah, I started the project in the beginning 9 years ago. But at the time, I still didn't understand what that meant. And that it really was about just going through these experiences and just being, persevering to find what I was needing to find, whatever that is. I mean, the Holy Grail is a mystery, right? And I think it's a metaphor for just basically what you think is something possibly unattainable, but it's there, or maybe it's something that's subjective to you. I mean, I had to look it up, right? It's a metaphor used for something that's highly sought but difficult to find. And what is it that's highly sought? I think for all of us, it's meaning and purpose. And I think for many of us, it's difficult to find because there's a lot of self-doubt. I think self-doubt is a huge reason, like a huge contributing factor where people may not even like pursue what they really wanted to pursue because maybe someone told them that they couldn't do it. Maybe someone told them that they may not be good enough. Or maybe someone was told that, taught that you have to be less than because you're only known to be mediocre. And sometimes, when someone shows up like Aldous, or in my case, Elaine, you fight tooth and nail against it, The line, you're a man of infinite promise and goodness. And it's like, nah, that can't be me. No, that's not me, right? And if that's not you, then who is? It's an interesting thing. I think all of us have this sense that we're not content with like where we are in our life, but then there's this fear that keeps us that keeps us held back from even trying. And that's tragic because you think about the fact that like even if you just try just a little bit, you get somewhere. You get somewhere by giving something a little effort. There's no such thing as like giving something a little effort and not having gained something from that. Even if like the outcome is something that isn't attained or maybe considered even a failure, right? But in that you gained, often in the form of a lesson. So I often think back on like, well, this episode actually made me think back on like why I fought tooth and nail against it and why I just kind of felt like it wasn't enough. And meanwhile, here I am right now in my current life with the profession that I have and finding success. It took a long time to see it. It took a long time to get here. But I couldn't say that the time spent in getting here wasn't valuable to me, because when I turned all those moments, all those like moments where I felt like I wasn't good enough or I wasn't smart enough, and I really examined those moments and turned them into lessons, I developed this deeper understanding of myself that really added so much value and confidence. Even in the confidence of knowing that it's okay not to know everything. And in that it's connecting, right? It's connecting to everyone else because there's no such thing as perfection. And I think perfection makes you even less approachable. And that's not what you want. Sometimes often people think that perfection means that you have to be better, so then you would be more likable. And that's actually the opposite of what's true. It's being inhuman and having flaws that makes you much more approachable and much more able to connect with other people, and having other people connect to you, that's valuable. And often I find in therapy that when I do self-disclose moments in my life that I wasn't successful, but yet I persevered, those are the things that actually is motivating and inspiring than coming up and showing up as like this, sterile therapist, which I don't really think has too much value. It would be no different as like, printing out all those worksheets from therapy aids and here, like help yourself, So, in general, this is what the episode meant for me. And I love Dylan's line when she speaks of Eldest, right? She says, "It doesn't matter that the Grail may or may not exist. What matters is that he strives for the perfection of his soul and the salvation of his soul, and that he has never wavered." I can tell you that that's my whole journey into becoming a psychologist. As some of you may know, because I've talked about it, that I've basically lost 10 years of my life because I became so sick. I became very ill with a lot of GI issues that at the time, doctors didn't even know why I was sick. I mean, now there's so much more information out there about like natural health, functional medicine, and basically that the gut GI microbiome diversity is important. When you go to to an average GI doctor, they don't believe in that. Anyway, lost 10 years of my life, but I definitely did persevere. It took me 10 years to graduate from the doctorate program, but I didn't give up on it. And I was so close to it, though. I was so close to saying this is not going to be for me. And at the time, my professor really encouraged me and said that given my cultural background and the skills that he saw that I had, that it would be such a waste or a loss in the field of psychology.
Mm.
And even now, fast forward like now, 20 years? I don't know. I'm not doing math right, but, or maybe I'm making myself much older. Who knows? But fast forward all these years, I see that value now, especially when I'm having clients reach out to me for my uniqueness, the things that make up my identity, right? My Asian background, my gaming hobby, my anime love. I can say that I'm definitely comfortable in the identity that I felt, and my own search for meaning and purpose was valuable for me. And I guess, if we talk about like what Delenn says at the end, she and Sinclair, meet up. And Sinclair says to her, "I'm surprised to see you here." She says, "Well, you shouldn't be." And then he says, "It just felt like someone should be. It's hard to live your life searching for something and never find it." And she's saying, "Are you speaking of Aldous or someone else?" And she goes on to say, "Well, he found what he was looking for, or what we're all looking for, which is a reason." From that perspective, I can certainly say that I found my reason to have searched this whole time for my own holy grail. And that reason is to become who I am now and be able to be, in this identity that I'm proud of. Given where my start was in my own childhood, this is not something that I would have ever expected to be, where I would have ever expected to be, and who I ever expected to become. And that's in and of itself short of a miracle. Here's another line where Thomas and Aldous has this conversation. They have this conversation and Thomas asks Aldous, "How did you end up on this path?" And he talks about, what happened. And he witnessed all this death around him and he grieved the loss. And then he tried to go back to what he used to do and the numbers didn't add up. And then it was only when he found that, it was only when he found where he needed to be, the numbers started adding up. And in many ways, it feels the same to me. Like I knew I didn't really belong working in the nursing home setting in the capacity that I did. And even then, other people were telling me, you don't look like you belong here. And they were right. I think sometimes when, people feel that discomfort, that discontent, or they know that they're capable of much more, but they're not living up to their capacity, I think it's an indication for some people telling them that they're not at the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. That represents who they truly are and what their potential is. And that's something to really examine when you're feeling that, that uneasiness within you and that restlessness within you. And it's so important to take a moment to really think about what that is. I know I did because I felt that often. And it wasn't easy to sit with until I started working towards the direction that I was told that I needed to be on, right? But fought tooth and nail against because I didn't really feel like I was good enough or that it was too hard. But the effort was worth it because not putting in the effort and sitting with that uneasiness and feeling disappointed in yourself every day, that's effort in and of itself. To feel that way, it's exhausting.
More exhausting than everything you had to do to get where you are now?
It's a different kind. It's a different kind of exhausting. Not working towards your dreams is something that you're going to regret for the rest of your life. But putting in that effort and working towards what you feel is your reason and purpose. And once you find it, right? Or sometimes you just have to go through the motions of just being on that path that you need to be on until it feels like your reason and purpose. Because I think sometimes you just have to know you have to be on it to know that it is what it is for you. Because sometimes I think the self-doubt and the other negative thoughts take hold. It's a different kind of exhausting. It's a different kind of effort. But like not doing anything is also effort. It's effort, but it's a different kind of feeling where you're wasting time. And knowing that you're wasting time and not living up to what you think your potential could be makes someone feel distraught in and of itself. And sitting in that feeling day in and day out is also challenging. Because when you work towards something and you're putting in a little effort each time, right? At least you get the highs of that. At least you can acknowledge the achievements from that, those little successes and triumphs, and that keeps you going, right? Whereas the latter, or the former, it keeps you staying in one place. And you don't feel the successes and joys, and you don't get that, that nice release of dopamine, or even like some sense of pride that you can do it, or pride from doing it. And as Aldous says, you can't run away all your life. And staying in one place is also running away from the reality and the truth of who you are and the identity that you want to become. I think I had too many moments of those where I stayed content. I stayed very content looking at the same four walls that the people who were in nursing homes were looking at, waiting for their death to come. But I did that in my 20s and 30s. And like looking back, it like feels like such a waste that I didn't belong there, and I knew it. I cannot bring, I can't get that time back. There could have been so much I could have done during that time. But I stayed content, but content is not the same as feeling fulfilled or feeling happy.
Mm. You were good at your job, though. You were very good at your job.
No doubt, right? That I've learned a lot from my experiences. It gave me so much perspective that it allowed me to come into myself even more and face my fears. Like I was immensely shy. And one of the first tasks that I had working in a group home was to, run groups. And initially there was a lot of doubt, anxiety in doing that. But then the perspective comes in where I'm running groups to people who are here for the rest of their lives, right? Helping them get through each day. And being able to offer what I could offer was valuable to me. That my presence was just simply valuable to me in and of itself. No doubt that I learned a lot. I certainly managed the behavioral health unit of a nursing home, and then I helped programming of establishing this secure dementia unit at a nursing home. I certainly learned a lot and understood nursing home policies, but I overstayed. I've already gained everything I needed to gain, and I still stayed because I was content. That's the part where it's a little tragic. But even still, I wonder if I could have had other experiences and not been there for too long. It's a very depressing place to be. Rarely do you ever find someone that says, hey, look, I love living here. When I get older, I want to live in a nursing home. No one ever says this, right? I think I've spoken enough about what this episode means to me. I mean, it was a powerful episode in reflecting my own humble beginnings and looking back at the things that held me back. And I hope I, was able to convey this message that it's not so much about not having confidence in yourself, but that you do build confidence in the journey that you're on. In your own search for meaning, you build your identity and everything that makes, will become who you are. And you won't know until you take that journey. A few years ago, I went to this trauma convention in Boston. At the time, I said, hey, look, it's pretty expensive, but I gotta go. I gotta go and experience the world. And this will give me a great opportunity just to like be more exposed to the things that I wanted to learn. And I remember going out one night and sitting at the bar and having a meal, and someone came and sat next to me. And he was a businessman from London. He asked me why I was here, in Boston. And I told him. And I told him where I was in my life, that I was resigning from my position in the social services department of the nursing home as a dementia unit manager, where right. And I told him about like my doubts. I told him how comfortable I was having my own office, my own bathroom, my own fridge and my own microwave, all the comforts of, what I needed in my own office, and that I wouldn't have that because the capacity of how I was going to work as a psychologist was going to be different, since I was then going to travel to different nursing homes to be a psychologist, which is funny, but that's where I wanted to start because I felt like I needed something to help me get back into it, since I've been out of it so long. So as I expressed my doubts to him, he utters this line to me. He says, "You'll never make that journey if you stay with your fridge." And that couldn't have been any more poignant.
That's the line of the show right there.
I often think of this line, right? And I often, and then like anything could be a fridge, right?
Brilliant.
The metaphor was absolutely genius. And from then on, right, anything that represented a fridge to me was keeping me in place.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want that. I realized that I didn't want that. And from that moment on, I said, hey, the hell with it. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this. I may not be good at it, but if I try something and work towards something, then I can become good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really all it takes. It was brilliant indeed.
I have read, and again, when I'm looking at old Babylon 5 conversations, this is from, back in the day when it was airing, okay? And JMS was one of the first, I want to say he was the first creator of a television program to actually go on the internet and talk with fans, like to set up a forum where fans could discuss the show with him. I'm pretty sure he was the first person to ever do this. So there was a lot of discussion on the forums back in those times, and a lot of those conversations have been archived, so you can go back and read them and read like how he responded to fans' questions about certain episodes. And there was a lot of discussion about this particular episode that what's his name? Not Aldous, the other guy.
Thomas?
Yes, Thomas. That basically Thomas just took on Aldis's personality. Like he he was seeking to have some kind of meaning aside from just sitting on B5 because he thought that he was the jinx or that he was the linchpin in keeping Babylon 5 from being destroyed because of his history, but that he didn't really have a sense of self and all he did was just take on this persona because he didn't have anything else. That he didn't really gain a real sense of purpose, or he wasn't following a path. He just took on this role because he had no other role to fill. What do you think about that?
Oh, okay. What do you think about that?
I feel there's some validity to that. I mean, he spent the whole episode following Aldous around and seeing Aldous' perspective and listening to Aldous talk to him about all these things and all his meaning and his particular philosophy. And then Thomas just kind of adapts that as his own at the end. But is he really on that path, or is he just trying out a new suit of clothing?
I think my opinion is this, right? Whether or not he adopts it. Well, I don't really know. We don't really know whether or not he's trying it out or he's actually adopted it as his identity, right?
Yeah, Garibaldi sort of expresses that same sentiment at the end where he's like, oh, he didn't expect him to even show up at the end. Remember, he's like, oh, he's probably, all this left him all his money and he probably just took off or whatever. He didn't expect to see him at the end.
Well, look, the way I perceived Garibaldi's comment at the end was this, that like he didn't he thinks so little of Thomas that he didn't think that Thomas would even like come into this more valuable role. I mean, as much as I think Garibaldi thinks of like the Seeker as being a lunatic, right? I think there's some deference to it where like I think he perceives Thomas to be even like less than, because after all, he continues to call him Jinxo, right?
Hmm.
And so Garibaldi's perspective on that, I think, is just more like him like degrading him and demeaning him and not having any, not really seeing him with much value until the very end where he says, I'll see you later, Jingso. And Thomas says, Thomas, my name is Thomas. And what a
Hmm.
poignant moment where it feels as if Thomas came into his own identity.
Mm.
When we look at when we look at like the theories of identity development, and it's Marsh's theories of identity development in psychology, right? There are four ways in which you develop identity. And we can say that maybe based on this episode, what Thomas is showing is basically foreclosure. And foreclosure is basically where people just adopt the role that they're told to adopt. Like, parents to say, hey, when my kid grows up, my kid's going to be a doctor, and then they just set them on the forth to the kid being a doctor, and the kid becomes a doctor, right?
Hmm.
Instead of like, let's say, I have to like look this up a little bit. Oh, I can't find it here. Okay, I'm hoping that I'm gonna say this right. But we don't know, but we already know for a fact that Thomas has explored, because again in Marcia's identity development, there is a stage of identity development where you explore your options for your career and your identity. You explore, you try this, you try that. And Thomas did the construction. He did this for all the other Babylons until they all exploded, right?
Yeah, most of his
He
life, that's all he did.
Yeah, that's all he knew most of his life, but he did something else. It wasn't as if he adopted this identity from the get-go. Like, hey, he explored it. And then, yeah, in some ways, like, all this, like, I feel like all this definitely put this on him, but I think he saw in all this the fact that, I think all this saw in Thomas, that Thomas was a seeker as well. Like,
Hmm.
he had goodness in him. He had something more to him because there's a part of him that was looking out for people and trying to do the right things. Now, the way I also see Thomas taking on this role is this. I don't, the identity of being a seeker is unique to each person. As we talked about what the Holy Grail is, the Holy Grail is unique to each person, isn't it? Because as Dylan defined it, it's a reason. And as, you know, and as like it's defined online, it's a metaphor for something that's sought out and difficult to find, and whatever that is. You know, I could say that I have my own Holy Grail, and my Holy Grail would be very different from someone else's. And who's to say that Thomas's own Holy Grail would be the same or different from Aldis's? I don't know what journey Thomas is going to be on and what he's going to find. But the fact is, he's not staying with his fridge. At that very end, when he says, "My name is Thomas," it's the first time that he gives himself self-respect.
Mm-hmm.
And that alone is going to take him in whatever direction he wants to go, because now he's no longer confined to some negative name and associated with the catastrophe of the other B5 stations. He's now broken that cycle of just being Jingso. And that's valuable. You know, one of the questions you usually ask about media therapy is, what is your least favorite scene?
Mm-hmm.
In the very beginning of Babylon 5, I kind of liked Garibaldi. I can't explain to you the reason why. You know, I thought my perspective was a little different then. Now, I do not like Garibaldi. He's a jerk. He's an absolute jerk. And in many ways, someone who shows, you know, to be constantly like closed off and judgmental. In the conversation where he's having with Sinclair, he's like, "Hey, you know, make me a happy man. Let me clean up downstairs, right? If I put all my teams out, we can wipe out 9/10 of the crime rate in a sweep."
Mm-hmm.
It's a very limited, rigid statement. There's absolutely no compassion, no understanding, and no like really even like thinking about how those even people got to that place to begin with, because sometimes we're not all blessed with like the opportunities that we need to have to be successful. After all, we need resources to be successful. We need a whole bunch of factors to help us be successful. We need resources. We need support. We need someone who believes in us. We need the right conditions. We need to have all our basic needs met in order for us to even begin to look for our identity, right? If you don't have food, clothing, shelter, and even just basic love met, you can't go to work towards looking for the identity that you want to have, or like the reason you want to have. You're kind of stuck in the basic needs. If we like look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you're stuck only trying to meet your basic needs, how else can you be? What can you default to?
If you also consider the fact of what you were just saying, where, you know, he's very judgmental and he's lacking in compassion. He's very able to stand back and judge people. But we're talking about a person, a character who only has that job because of the support of Sinclair, because of the kind of person he was that made it difficult for him to keep jobs or get hired to do jobs. So this same person can turn around and judge other people.
Right.
And
Right.
that's very telling of the kind of person he is.
How quickly they
What
forget where
his
they came from, huh?
Exactly. It's very easy for certain types of people to turn around and point the finger and judge others and not recognize their level of privilege or the amount of support they were given. But when someone else is getting support, then all of a sudden it's wrong or bad.
Yeah, it's the very thing where what people do, where some people do, is is this projection, right? They
Hmm.
project under other people the very thing that they themselves didn't like of themselves. And it's their way to like manage their own like anxieties or their own failures and feel better about who they are. But it's so easy for him then to say, well, look, let's do this. Let's claim all out. Meanwhile, Sinclair, right? He always tries to come from a place of understanding, even if he's not sold on it. I love the fact that he gives something an open mind.
Hmm.
Like even showing up for all, for Thomas at the end and, Aldous' body being taken. And his response even to this, he says, most of them are just people with nowhere else to go. They come here looking for a new life, a new job, and when they don't find it, they can't afford transport back. What are you going to do? Shove them out the airlock?
Probably, if you
He
left it
would.
up to Garibaldi. And it's not that he's even said that on
He said,
occasion. I
don't
think
tempt
you,
me.
yeah, and I think you pointed it out in an earlier episode, the episode where they were doing all the religious
Yes?
observances, and he was making nasty comments then, and you were just like, "What the hell is up with him?"
Mm-hmm.
You
You
know?
know, and we certainly know that JMS has inserted this person in this kind of character in the series because
Hmm.
you have that other perspective where it challenges you to think about the conflicts, right?
Yep.
Because it's not just Garibaldi he thinks that way. Many other people do as well.
Right.
So, but each time the response that Sinclair gives to Garibaldi in these interactions is poignant. And I certainly think that it's meant to try to teach. I'm not really quite sure if many of the audience would see that and be like, "Oh yeah, this is a good moment. This is where I can have my values, challenged and then try considering something different."
Hmm.
But
Sinclair is
what I've
easily
learned, hmm?
Sinclair is easily like as soon as Delenn challenges him and says,
Yeah,
I'm surprised that you're treating him this way, he listens and then he considers and then he
right.
says, okay, I get it. Like he's open to
Sure,
being
dialogue.
challenged. Hmm. Hmm.
Whereas other people are much more rigid, right? And it's unfortunate because what I've learned that the people who are really rigid in their values and beliefs and their standards, they don't change until something happens to them that forces them to reconsider their values, standards, and beliefs. And sometimes that very thing is something that's tragic. And I hope, in these episodes that, I do present that it continues to be, something that is enlightening or at least gives you something to think about that's different from, your own.
What did you think of, the I always tell you to pay attention to, the top plot, so to speak, whatever is progressing the show, whatever the
Uh-huh.
current episode is, and then
Like the
everything
time where Delenn
underneath.
says to like Sinclair, well, he's the only one in Last True Seeker when Sinclair sends this, right? But then Delenn says in response, well, then you don't really know yourself.
Yes. So all of the underlying plot that like has taken us however many 15 episodes and we still haven't gotten to it, but what did you think about the story that Thomas told about all the B5 stations? Like, did you ever think about all the different B5 stations? before that? Like you did mention to me once that you were like, "Oh, it's Babylon 5," and that there were four other ones. But we finally got plot points regarding, everything that happened to them.
Yeah. So, when we get Thomas's perspective on like the other Babylons, right? They all exploded.
Well, they didn't all explode.
You made it seem like they all exploded.
What two of them were sabotaged,
Same thing.
right? And Babylon 4 winked out of existence.
Something bad happened to all of them. And therefore now
Right.
we're at Babylon 5.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong. So Babylon 5 is now where they're trying to do something different to keep the station alive, right? By having all these
No,
ambassadors on board.
it was the same. It was the same
Really?
project. The Babylon project was to make like an like
A meeting place for aliens, for all the
yeah, yeah.
races.
You've been
Aliens.
paying attention. Yes, it was always supposed to be that. But obviously when you're trying to set something up like that, especially when you consider that the Earth Minbari War had just finished, there was all this conflict. Of course, there's going to be people that do not want this to happen, that do not want all these ambassadors represented. They don't want peace. They don't think there can be. So, of course, they're going to be sabotaged. They're going to be all these different kinds of problems. But that was always what they wanted to set up. And this is the closest that they have gotten to it actually functioning and working. And if you remember some of the episodes where the Earth press are always like, no one wanted Sinclair's job, and pretty much Sinclair was put there because they thought it was
Oh,
going to
yes.
fail, right? So even on Earth, they think it's just nonsense that this even exists, and they give it like 5% chance of failing because no one believes in being able to have any kind of peace among all of these different races. So it was always the intention for Babylon 5 to be what it is. It just hasn't been able to get as far as it's gotten until now. And the fourth one didn't even get a chance to come online. I think when they pushed the start button, it pretty much got sucked into a vortex and disappeared, and no one knows what happened to it.
I did not know that.
They said it in this episode. He described it for the first time. He
That
said
you know what?
he looked
Yeah, you
back
know
as
what
he was
he
leaving.
did. He did.
Yeah. And it's
He
like,
did.
does that give you any kind of thoughts? Like, does that spark your interest? Does that make you curious about why all of these things happened to all the Babylon 5 stations and why they kept building them and why they kept trying to create this? And then when one just gets sucked into a black hole for no reason, like, does that make you wonder why? Or does that make you curious? Or are you just kind of like, oh, whatever? Like, does that interest you at all? Along with everything that you're learning underneath, like about Sinclair, about the line, about the war, about the hole in his mind, all the things that they keep saying, does that pique your curiosity at all? Or are you so kind of tied up in every individual episode that you don't really think about the ongoing mystery of B5 and Sinclair?
There's certainly ongoing mystery, especially, it happened when, oh God, I'm not going to get the name right, when those ships started showing up and that psychic woman like dropped her cup, her cup, because she saw them coming. What is it? Those death.
Oh yes, yes. The woman who they also thought was like a fake psychic or whatever.
Right.
Who saw?
She's.
Yeah.
What are those ships called again?
The shadow ships.
They're called shadow ships.
Yeah.
I keep forgetting the name.
She saw the destruction of Babylon 5.
Yes. That was the episode where my interest in the long story, the main story was piqued for me. And then you get these like little nuggets from Delenn. I mean, along with the fact that like Sinclair all of a sudden like was spared, and then he became the hero of this war, and he was passed out for all of it, right? And he doesn't even know how.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the episode where my interest was piqued. And I was like, what is going to happen? I wonder what's going to happen. And then you look at like all the other ships where like it failed. And then I wondered, okay, what's going to happen to B5? Is it going to survive or not? And why did they put Sinclair in this position? And he must mean something significant.
Hmm.
Or maybe, and it was alluded to that he was the last hope to make the Babylon station, B5 station to become successful, but he doesn't even know it, right?
Right. The Minbari would not support the station unless he was
Right.
put in
He
charge
was
of it. Yep.
appointed. So certainly my interest there is piqued. You know, the only hypothesis I could come up with and think about is this. The B5 stations all brought together races where all the aliens and Earth, humans, came together to be able to share their ideas, in quote, with harmony, right?
Hmm.
But we already know that that's one of the most difficult things to achieve. You can't, people can't even have harmony within friendships that last too long or even like relationships. And then you're talking about a whole ship full of like everyone that's come together in one space and you're expecting them to have harmony and create
Hmm.
understanding for one another. And like in the very simplest of example, Garibaldi can't even accept the people who are down below, all the people who are um, participating in criminal activity because they're just simply trying to get through their day.
Hmm.
So, on a very basic sense, I think that like this idea of harmony is difficult to achieve. Even Jakar has his own agenda, and Londo's there for some sort of reason. But then now with like the shadow ships, like who are they? What are they? What do they want? Like what are they trying to really destroy and not allow to have to come happen, right? And then you have
Hmm.
Kosh. Like what's his purpose? And even the line that he even utters where Sinclair like goes to him and he tells him that Deuce wanted the people to think that he had the Vorlons working for him and figured it would add to his image and intimidate people. He says, why? And Sinclair says, well, after all, no one exactly knows what you look like. And that makes people a little nervous. And to that, he just says, good.
Hmm.
So what's his purpose and what's his goal?
Well, we already saw him doing shady things to Talia, right? Like
Yeah,
trying
we
to,
did. We
right?
did.
So we can't know what his purpose is. And I keep trying to kind of remind you that, the Minbari literally tried to genocide the entire Earth population,
Mm-hmm.
that the Vorlons are literally the oldest race in the universe, and yet Kosh is just hanging out on the station like, you know, and like, so what is he there for? What is he supposed to represent? What are his motives? Why is he experimenting on the telepath? Everyone is suspicious, especially the Minbari, right? Because we don't know what is going on with them. They
Yeah,
were
you have
2 inches
you
from
have such
destroying the entire Earth.
right, you have such minimal interactions with Kosh, and all he gives you are like these one-line answers. Then all we know right now is he's in his chamber, chilling in his suit, and probably listening to some Vorlon music. Who knows?
Right. And the shadows did show up, right? And they broke his encounter, so there was some sort of altercation.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of mystery, and it's hard to kind of keep track of it because you only get little bits and pieces every 4 episodes or so, right? It's hard to keep track of what the real story is that JMS is trying to
Right, and
tell.
after a year of like hiatus,
Yeah, but remember that he wrote this out in its entirety already. So he knows the story. So every little bit is just him dropping hints, right, of a greater story. But it's taken 15 episodes to even sort of touch upon it, but you've been getting little hints, and I'm just always curious as to whether or not you are kind of roped in to what the actual story is.
I'm roped in. I certainly want to see what's to come. I mean, it's a mystery to me. I mean, it certainly is a mystery, the all four of the Babylon ships and what's happened to them. So, yeah. Let's do my best to try to keep up with this project. And now that we have this setup going, it may be a little bit easier for us to do this. It's much more convenient where you're not driving over to try to set up and do all that. It's less, I don't know, it definitely relieves some of this constraints of it. So let's see how this
Absolutely.
continues to work. We could be much
Well,
more
that's what
flexible.
everyone cares about. Just remember, like all of the people that have ever emailed or written about, if you're going to finish, it really comes down to them wanting to know your reaction to finding out the whole story.
they want they want to know what my reaction is at the end, huh?
Yeah, they want
And
to
so they're go
know.
so then is everyone going to sit through these hour-long episodes of just me talking?
I'm sure they will. The people that are invested are like, is she going to finish? She's like right at the end. What is she going to think? Oh my God. Like, people want to know what your reaction is going to be when the whole truth comes out.
Thank you. Thank you for being so interested and thank you for being so interested in me. That's truly something. That's truly a valuable gift to be interested in someone who's so far away and only on video speaking only one-sidedly. Um, that is definitely something. Yeah, let's continue. I'll commit to this as, as much as I could. I'll try. I certainly I cut down actually on my work in order for me to be able to do this project, to be honest. I'm no longer in a salaried position because I couldn't do it anymore. And I wanted to have more free time for the things that I do enjoy. And this was something that I very much enjoyed. At the same time, I felt was valuable for me. I want to continue deepening my analytical abilities, my ability to think a little deeper, and also be able to share my thoughts that to someone else may be something of value or even inspirational. And I think that's important. So, yeah, let's try to continue as best as we can. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And I'll be back again next time. Bye.